Every time I turn it up, you hear that real fast car going down the road. They like to speed up and down all the time over here. Chapter 12? Home again. Been having the sniffles. At noon on Thursday, Toby and Wendy rattled happily and dirtily home in a coal truck, which was the only thing that Wendy would climb into. Mr. Riggs didn't own a horse van and couldn't find one in the city. The coal truck was an inspiration. Wendy disdained all the other trucks offered him, but loved the coal truck out of sight. Toby didn't care how dirty they got as long as they reached the farm. The sun was fine and hot, and he and Mr. Adams, the driver, sang ballads up and down the hill. When they drove into the yard, 2 trucks were already there. So was Johnny. Yahoo! Yelled Johnny. What are you doing, Toby? Why don't you stay home? Toby jumped up and scooped up his little brother. I'm here, aren't I? Get out of the way now while I help Wendy down. Mr. Adams lowered the back of the coal truck. Think you can make it, Toby? Sure, thanks, Mr. Adams. He can jump. Come on, Wendy, jump. Wendy sat down on his rump and slid off the truck. Mr. Adams laughed. Smartest pony I ever saw. Johnny beamed. Wendy is smarter than anybody, but look at him. He is kind of dirty, Mr. Adams admitted. But then what can you expect of a coal truck? Look at me. Look at Toby. Look at yourself. Toby came off on you. Johnny giggled. I don't care. What's a little dirt? Betsy came tearing out of the house. Toby! Mom says for you and Mr. Who to come in for dinner. It's all ready. Betsy came tearing out of the house. Toby shooed her away. Don't grab me. I'm all coal dust. Please show Mr. Adams where the bathroom is. I'll take Wendy out to the stable and be right back. Nothing to eat for me, said Mr. Adams. Maybe some coffee. Towed by Betsy and Johnny, he went toward the house. Toby led Wendy to the stable, washed and curried him, filled his manger with the new oats. Whoosh, said Wendy comfortably, rubbing his chin against Toby's shoulder. This is more like it, isn't it? Wendy didn't bother to answer. He was too busy eating. Toby felt hungry again. Ribs met him at the barnyard gate and pranced ahead of him to the woodshed. Poke descended from the top of the woodpile. Meow? Sorry, meow? It's a question, I guess. Toby and Ribs, like gentlemen, allowed her to go into the kitchen door first. Mom was busy at the kitchen table. Dad and Mr. Riggs were talking seriously, leaning against the jambs of the pantry door. Please, said Mom, her face pink. Will you get out of my way? Jim, move! Please, said Mom, her face pink. Will you get out of my way? Jim, move. Oh, sorry, Mary. Well, Tom, this is the way I see it. Dad and Mr. Riggs wandered over to the woodbox. Sat down on it. Dad noticed him. Toby, hello, nice riding, partner. Hi, Dad. Wendy did it. I went to sleep. Come here, said Dad. Toby walked over. You're sitting on Matilda, and if Betsy finds out... Oh, glory! Dad stood up quickly, shook Matilda back into shape, and sat down again with the doll on his lap. Toby put his hand into Dad's lean, hard one. Tom, this is the best son a fellow ever had. Don't tell me, said Mr. Riggs. He couldn't see straight from tiredness when he got to my house last night. When he got there, that's the main thing. Dad gave him a hug. Better eat your dinner. Yes, sir. He and Toby grinned at each other. The 2 truck drivers said Mr. Riggs refused anything to eat, but accepted a cup of coffee while the family had dinner. They were nearly finished when Betsy let out a scream that made them all jump. "Look," she hollered, pointing out of the west window. "Look who's coming down the hill!" They piled out into the front yard. Mr. Riggs and the drivers began to roar with laughter. Dad and Mom, Toby and Betsy and Johnny stood there speechless for a solid minute. Then, as if they'd been touched off at once like a string of firecrackers, they yelled, "Cliff!" Cliff came limping slowly down the road, leading Chris, the bull calf. Cliff had somebody's old gray felt hat. Excuse me. Tilted rakishly on the side of his head. He had sworn for years he wouldn't be caught alive in a hat unless it was 20 below zero. Chris had a hat on his head too, but it was a lady's hat, a bonnet, with holes for his tan ears tied under his chin with purple ribbons. Around his neck was a piece of frayed rope. Betsy and Johnny dashed up the road. "Cliff! Cliff!" Mom and Dad stood still, holding hands, both of them trying not to cry. Toby ran after the kids. "Cliff! Hey, Cliff!" "Barnacles on a bulrush," growled Cliff. "Untangle me, you youngins. Anybody think I'd been somewhere?" They slapped the gray hat onto Toby's head, handed the end of the rope to Betsy. "Lead this beast home. He's got me worn out. Back and fill, back and fill. All he does aside from galloping. Stubbornest critter I ever saw. Hello, Jim, Mary." "Oh, Cliff," Mom and Dad said, and excuse me. The three of them hung on to each other, laughing and crying and laughing again. Cliff looked around the farm. "Kinda messed up, ain't it?" "Might be worse," said Dad. Johnny climbed up Cliff. "I am mad at you." He seized Cliff's hair and kissed him at the same time. "Are? Let go. My head's sunburned." "Yes, you didn't take me with you when you went sailing footing." Cliff hugged him, eased him down. "Good thing I didn't. Had enough trouble with Chris." "You're too big to fit in anybody's hind pocket, Snakes," he said to Dad and Mom. "I was worried you weren't still here. Well, all I got to do is wash up and get to work." "You pop in the house and eat some dinner," said Mom briskly. "What's the matter with your leg?" "Charley horse," said Cliff. "Kicked a bridge, knocked it over, got Chris and me to the side in a backwash so we wouldn't get conked in the head. We didn't. Never had such a ride in my life. Ended up in the lake. Swam ashore, that's all. Guess I could eat at that." Toby helped Betsy put Chris in Jake's old stall with George at. Then they hung the ridiculous bonnet on a nail, fed and watered Chris, and then streaked for the house. They didn't want to miss a word of Cliff's adventure. Bets went inside, but Mr. Adams' coal truck and one of the other trucks were pulling out, so Toby joined Dad in the yard. "Thanks, Tom," Dad said to Mr. Riggs. "I can't begin to tell you." "Shut up," said Mr. Riggs in an amiable voice but looking mad. "What'd you think?" "I'll settle with you next week when I can get up," said Dad. "You've got till kingdom come or darn near," said Mr. Riggs. "Quit stewing and let me know when you need anything else. Phone ought to be working pretty soon." His fat face puckered with worry. "I don't know what to do about the other farms up the valley." "Got any ideas?" "I could try to get stuff as far as the covered bridge. Any way we could find out?" Dad glanced up the washed out road. "Guess you'd better not try trucking it. Road shot. Toby, do you want to ride Windyfoot as far as the covered bridge and find out what people need?" "Sure, Dad. Have everybody make a list. Mr. Riggs will wait until you come back. Tell them that Mr. Riggs will truck it to us, and we can manage from here on with Tilly and Tossie to get it to them." "Right, Dad." Toby was wild to hear Cliff's story, but the People up the valley were more important. He saddled the pony again. He could get to the bridge and home again before nightfall. It made him sick to his stomach riding up the road. Out of 10 farmhouses, 3 were left. When he passed the farm where Deborah Davidson used to live, he had to get off Wendy and be ill in the middle of a wet field. He blew his nose, wiped his sweating face, climbed back on the pony, and kept going. Windyfoot tossed his black mane and picked his way carefully. The 3 remaining farms had long lists. Sam Rogers and Phil Hoyt and Len Willett were so grateful that he turned up that Toby felt worse. Crooked River was still rushing. There was a great gap where the covered bridge once stretched, its weathered silver length, and the water spread noisily over the meadows on both banks. It was nearly dark when he rode back into the yard. Dad and Mr. Riggs were waiting on the front steps. Dad took Wendy's bridle. "Thank you, Toby. Here's the lists, Mr. Riggs." "I'll get the stuff down tomorrow," promised Mr. Riggs. He waddled toward the last truck. "Okay, Andy, step on it. Town, Mr. Toby Clark." "Yes, Mr. Riggs." Excuse me. "That pony of yours. Wish I was young enough to ride him the way you do. Wish I had a pony and a boy like you. So long." The truck roared, backing out of the driveway. "Scoot, Toby," said Dad. "You need some rest. I'll take care of Wendy and milk Georgette." "I want to listen to Cliff," said Toby. "Cliff," said Dad. "That old Wanderfoot. The old Wanderfoot. Mom told you he'd come home. Go on and listen." "I haven't had a chance yet." He went off toward the stable, his arm over Windyfoot's neck. Toby stumbled into the kitchen. Mom and Betsy and Johnny were sitting around the kitchen table listening to Cliff, who was smoking his pipe and telling a story. "Hey, wait for me," Toby sprawled into the Boston rocker. "Darn it, I've missed everything." They smiled at him. "Missed what?" asked Cliff. "The train to Halifax?" "Where you've been." "Oh, that," said Cliff. "Well, I got the Wanderfoot out of my system once and for all. I ain't going to so much as flick an eyelash at a crow from now on. Not me, no thanks." "Crows," chirped Johnny. "I'll flick both eyelashes at 'em." "Wouldn't put it past you," said Cliff calmly. "You and your wing bones. But take my word for it, it's tough walking home." He looked at Betsy, especially with a calf tagging along. "My feet are hot as the 4th of July. "Take your shoes off," said Mom. "Why didn't you do it before?" "Tell Toby where you got the bonnet for Chris." Excuse me. Ugh. 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 Yuck, 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 yuck. Yuck, 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 yuck. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, excuse me. All right. Excuse me. Yep. Cliff stretched his long legs and wiggled his green socks. "I got any clean clothes left?" "Clean," said Mom. "I haven't had time to get everything dried out yet. What do you need?" Cliff's lean face turned red. "Nightshirt, please." Where was I? Oh, yes. Toby, here I was, thrashing around and trying to keep that calf's head above water, when what do I see but an old lady's hat sailing down on top of me, just beyond old lady Hennessy's landing. That was, and I thought, where's old lady Hennessy? But I couldn't see hide nor hair of her, so I grabbed the bonnet. He coughed, licked at his pipe. "I'm talking too much." No, you aren't," said Toby eagerly. "Go on, please, Cliff." "Go on again," said Johnny, giggling. "Tell Toby what happened." "Well," said Cliff, his face perfectly straight, "it was a pretty hat floating in the eddy, and I thought it would look all right on somebody. So I put the ribbon in my teeth and kept on going with Chris. All of a sudden, here comes old lady Hennessy, like a steamboat in full blast, bearing down on us. Yunk! Betsy put her head down on her arms and shook with snorts. Stop that, said Cliff. Wasn't funny at the time. I could tell you, if I have to go sailing, I wouldn't pick Mrs. Hennessy to go sailing with. I got my pride, said Cliff with dignity, lighting another match. Mom whooped. It went out. Here, Cliff. Thanks, Mary. Evening, Jim. Dad grinned, sat down on the floor. Evening, Cliff. Go on. I heard something about Mrs. Hennessy as I was coming in. Lie down, Ribs. Poke. That female, said Cliff, right in the middle of a flood. She hollers at me. I'm a thief. Me? I swiped her best hat, she says, and if I didn't have my mouth full of purple ribbon, I'd have told her what I thought of her. Anybody with a smidge of sense would know better than to start off downstream with a hat on. Barnacles on 10,000 bulrushes, roared Cliff. She made me tired. Toby's stomach ached with laughter. What'd you do, Cliff? Swam, said Cliff. Couldn't let go of Chris when I couldn't swim. I let us be washed along. Nothing else to do. Mrs. Hennessy, she overpassed us once, but we went faster when we got around to it. Last I saw of her, she was hitched to a tree just above the falls. She was high, if not dry. I hope somebody found her, but I'm sorry for whoever did. She made enough noise to wake up Webster County. What happened at the falls? Dad hugged his knees. We went over 'em, said Cliff. Don't ask me how. There was too much water. We missed the rocks. That Chris is one good calf. If I ever saw stars, heard tell the crest was 24 feet. We went with the crest, bridges and everything going along with us. Don't know why we didn't get smashed to smithereens. Next thing I knew, we were up in the lake. By that time, Chris was holding me up. It was confounded cold. We started swimming for shore and made it. Then we headed for home. That's all, said Cliff. Blamed pipe gone out again. Maybe you need some more tobacco, said Dad. Here. Thanks, said Cliff. Anything else you want to know while I feel like talking? Yes, said Toby. Where'd you get the gray hat? Oh, that, said Cliff. Picked it off a scarecrow left over from last summer. I was getting freckled. The family howled. Well, good night, said Cliff, letting go of a grin. I could use a little mattress. Oh, Cliff, said Toby. Gosh, we're glad you're home. So am I, said Cliff, giving him an affectionate shake, which rattled his teeth. Next time I get the Wanderfoot, I'll hitch myself to a maple tree and graze. Chapter 12. I'd have liked to have seen a picture of that cow with a hat.